Welcome back to Trillium Talk and our continuing coverage of the 2025 Ontario provincial election. We've reached out to all party leaders for a chance to come on, talk about their party's platform and what they would do should they win the election and become Premier of Ontario. From housing to healthcare and tariffs, we cover it all. Today, it's a special edition of Trillium Talk, powered by the Inside the Village podcast. Michael Friscolani and I sit down for a conversation with the leader of the Ontario NDP, Marit Stiles. Back on Inside the Village across the Village Media Network and available wherever you get your favorite podcasts with Michael Friscolani, our editor-in-chief. I'm Scott Sexsmith, and excited to have back with us again Marit Stiles, the leader of the NDP party. Marit, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
Okay, this is attempt number 2. We tried last week from your bus.
Yes.
We weren't too successful. However, today the signal looks great. It sounds great. We've decided to rename the NDP party the New Data Plan Party because.
Nice.
You like that?
Well, I was on a bus, to be fair, before, so there was
Absolutely.
that. But yes, this is much better.
It is much better, and we appreciate you taking the time. We know you've had a busy day today. Okay, all kidding aside, Marit, you've obviously expressed your frustration with the snap election called by Doug Ford and why you think it was called. Now that you're on the campaign trail, and we spoke briefly about this last week, do you feel the same, or do you see this as a bit of an unexpected opportunity?
Well, look, there's no question, as I've said before, that Doug Ford called this election. I think Ontarians know this too, because he wanted to pull an over on people, right? He'd do it in the middle of the winter. Hopefully, people will stay home. He's thinking, and maybe they won't even know there's an election here. And you see him today; he's in hiding this week. But I actually do think this is an opportunity. I think this is an opportunity now for people to vote for change. I think it's an opportunity for us to turn the page on Doug Ford and all the scandals and the bad deal and the healthcare crisis, and to elect a government that's going to be on the side of people. And I'm running to be the premier of this province. I think it's time for that change. I have a plan to address and fight rising costs, to hire doctors, to fix our schools, to build the homes that people really need in the province of Ontario. This is all part of my plan, and I'm excited about it.
We're going to get into some of that stuff, Marit, including sort of Doug Ford being MIA. But I do want to ask you about polls. We see them come out every couple of days. The latest one from Abacus does show that Ford's PCs are at about 41% support, Crombie's Liberals at around 28%, and your party at 21%. How much stock do you put in these kind of polls that come out throughout the campaign?
Well, look, the way I look at it, and I've been out there in communities all across the province, and I do think that a lot of people are just sort of waking up to the fact that there's an election happening at all. That's the truth, right? Everybody has busy lives. You're out there shoveling the snow in your driveway, and then you suddenly notice there's a half buried orange sign across the street. You're suddenly like, oh, there's an election happening, right? And that's all fine. I understand, because people have busy lives. So I think people are really just starting to turn their attention to the election, and so it's a really key moment right now, and elections do matter, and that's why I'm very focused on getting a very positive message out to people, reminding people that their vote does count, that they have a lot of power in their ability to vote and make change if they want to. And look, my focus throughout this campaign has very much been on flipping blue seats to orange, right? I see that as the path. I think it's really important, and the NDP, we are the official opposition. We have far more seats than any of the other parties, and that puts us in a really good position because we have boots on the ground in every corner of this province.
It's interesting you say that because, of course, Bonnie Crombie yesterday, I believe it was, really specifically urging NDP voters to vote for them. She's saying the Liberal Party is the one that can defeat Doug Ford. Obviously, it's a direct aim at you. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, I think it tells you everything about where the Liberal Party is at right now. I've said before, but I think Doug Ford quit as premier when this election was called at a terrible time for the province of Ontario. He quit as premier, but Bonnie Crombie now, the Liberal leader, is quitting the fight. I will not quit. I am running to be the premier of the province. I'm applying for that job, and I'm running to form a government. And my focus, as I said, is very much on flipping those blue seats to orange. That's what we have to do to defeat Conservatives. That's what I'm going to do. And I think, it's a bit cynical. I always find this kind of approach very cynical because I think people shouldn't have to settle. And I think what the Liberals are doing is saying, hey, settle for us, when in fact, this Liberal leader, she's received donations from private healthcare insiders and the same developers that tried to carve up the Greenbelt. There's a big difference between what I'm offering and what she's offering.
Marit, there's obviously lots of different issues and priorities on the minds of voters. For you, what's the most important?
Well, I think it has to be fighting the rising costs in the province of Ontario. And healthcare, of course, always a priority for New Democrats, and the healthcare crisis is very real. But if I can talk for a minute about affordability and rising costs, there's a lot that government can do here. So, for example, one of the things that we're proposing is a grocery rebate program that would be based on how much groceries have increased in cost since the Ford government, which was elected, which we all know is through the roof now. And a lot of people are struggling. So we want to put some money back in their pockets so that they can pay for food, put food on the table. And it'll be targeted toward lower and middle income Ontarians. For a family of 4, that's about $120 per month. I think that's going to be very helpful to a lot of people right now. But we're also going to tackle price gouging by the big grocery giants. And I can tell you one thing we won't be doing is sending a $200 check to Galen Weston.
Have you costed that plan, Marit? Do you know what that'll cost you to give families that rebate?
Yeah, it's about $4 billion. This is, of course, not that far off from things like what Doug Ford is paying right now to subsidize a luxury spa in downtown Toronto. So I think it's about priorities, right? And it's also, by the way, about the same that he spent to get those $200 checks out to everyone, including Galen Weston, 1 month, right, during the election. This is really about an ongoing support for people at a time when they really need it. And we know that many families are now having to turn to food banks, even if they have multiple jobs. That's the reality in Ontario today. We have to do something to address that.
It's interesting you say that, because I think it's some of the feedback we've heard from people about the $200 checks, love it or hate it. There were the feeling around, places I go, there were, well, how come this isn't geared toward people who actually need it? Because not everybody needs that $200.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're hearing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And, I never opposed the idea that people would receive that. I think that for a lot of people, it may have been welcome, but it's a one-time deal. And even if you're struggling a lot, it's just one time $200. The next month, you're back to trying to figure out how you're going to pay for groceries again or make your rent. So I think we need ongoing support for families as long as this crisis continues. And so that's what I'm going to provide. And then we're also tackling some of the other big rising costs. Like, for example, in Ontario, under Doug Ford, rent has gone up 38% on average across the province since 2018. And that's not just in big cities, that's in small towns. I mean, that's everywhere. So we have to address that. We need to bring back rent control and stop some of these rent evictions and dem evictions that you hear about. We have to stop people from losing their homes in the first place while we actually start to build more affordable housing.
And that's been a big part of your plan from day one, Marit, the
Yes.
protection and support of renters. You mentioned rent evictions, N12s, all of that other stuff. How do you do it? How do you fix it? How do you control it better?
Well, first of all, you have to address the loopholes that were created by the Conservatives. And frankly, some of them were not closed by the previous government either, right? So we need to end what we call above guideline increases, which really, they compound and they become a real problem for a lot of people as the years go on. We need to crack down on rent evictions and dem evictions. And again, rent control is a really important piece of that. But I also, as you mentioned, our Homes Ontario plan is the biggest home building plan in the province's history, well, in generations. And home building in Ontario, what we call home starts, are down to levels we haven't seen since the 1950s. They are just terrible in Ontario under Doug Ford. In BC, for example, we are seeing homes being built at about 4 times the rate here in Ontario. But, it's not only going to be developers and the private sector that build homes. We have to get back to having an agency of government that coordinates the building of nonprofit affordable housing. And that's working with builders and working with municipalities and others to get it done. And as I go around the province, there's so many towns and nonprofits that have projects ready to go. They just don't have a partner in the provincial government. So we've got to get moving on this.
Just the same question again. Have you costed that, Marit? How much would that cost?
Yes, we have costed it. I'm blanking on it right now, but I can tell you we're going to build, and I will get it for you because it's on our website. We have costed it. And I think the important thing to know too is our plan is 300,000, I think, units of truly affordable housing, and then 60,000 supportive housing, which is the kind of wraparound support that a lot of people who we know are living in encampments right now need urgently. And then the additional housing we're talking about, which is it amounts to 1.5 million units in 10 years, is a mix of housing. But again, I can't stress enough, our housing build in Ontario is so low right now. Doug Ford promised housing. He keeps saying he's going to do this. This is the third election he's making these promises. Nothing is happening. I said in the debate the other day, where are the houses, Doug? We don't have them, and people need them desperately.
Let's talk about encampments and ending chronic homelessness. Are you saying that as Premier you would end encampments?
Yes. I mean, we are talking about ending encampments, but we're talking about ending encampments with housing. Doug Ford talks about shutting them down, but where do people go? They just move to the next park or the next corner, right? Like they're not disappearing because the encampment is cleared. They're just moving on to another place in another, So we know what happens. We've seen it over and over again. And encampments, I think, in every community across this province, just about, is the legacy of Doug Ford and his government, and failing so massively to actually address the housing crisis. And the housing crisis is a real one. So as I said, the answer are a couple things, but I think bringing in rent control is really critical to preventing homelessness. I met this woman, her name is Lynn. I met her in Ottawa in a shelter, actually, and she pulled me aside. She said, I need to tell you my story because I never in a million years imagined I would end up like this. 64 years old, worked her whole life. Her rent kept going up. She got sick, was in the hospital, came back out, lost her home. That's it. Ended up living in her car for 8 weeks till she found a sheltered space. This is a story I hear over and over again. And the answer for somebody like Lynn and for so many people out there on the edge of homelessness is rent control and building truly affordable housing, and particularly supportive housing for people who are struggling.
I don't want to think that I only ask about money because my last 3 questions have been about money. But we saw the...
You're going to ask me how much it costs?
The Association of Municipalities of Ontario put out their report last month talking about homelessness. Right, yes. And it was a very detailed... the report was very well done, I found. I read it and I thought it had a ton of good information, factual information that maybe Ontarians didn't know about. But it did say that this is going to cost $11 billion. Yeah. So we need to actually invest the money. And the question is whether the political will is there. Are you willing to invest that level of money to end homelessness, to help end homelessness, chronic homelessness? Yeah,
I think we have no choice. I think it is the cost of bringing back hope and opportunity to Ontario. We've been talking a lot. I don't want to move away from this, but I will say we've talked a lot in this campaign, and Doug Ford wants to talk a lot about the tariffs. And certainly it's a real threat to our economy and our sovereignty as a nation, the threats that are coming from Donald Trump. We need to take them seriously. But we're already very weakened here in the province of Ontario. I moved here more than 30 years ago from Newfoundland. I was born and raised in Newfoundland. I came to Ontario, like so many people, for opportunity because there was a lot of potential and promise here. And that is not the Ontario we are in today. It is not the Ontario that my young adult daughters are being confronted with, right? So we have to address the homelessness crisis. We have to address the affordability crisis, to fight those rising costs, give people an opportunity to save, let alone feed themselves. If we're ever going to break through, we have to address the healthcare crisis. Our communities are becoming sicker, right? People are struggling. The mental health and addiction crisis is real. It is an epidemic across our province. The solution to that is healthcare. So we have to address these issues, or they're just going to continue to grow and get worse. And that is going to make us weaker as a province and as a country.
Let's talk about healthcare for a second, Marit, unless I'm reading it wrong. All three major parties promising to get everyone a family doctor by the next election. What makes your promise different?
Well, first of all, just simply the fact that the other two parties, Doug Ford has promised this for 3 elections. This is the third election. And I always say that the Liberals they invented the hallway healthcare crisis. Like, this happened under them. And Doug Ford and the Conservatives just poured gasoline all over that, right? And now it's even worse. They have not addressed the family doctor shortage, even though we knew it was coming for decades. And they haven't actually offered up any solutions to the healthcare crisis. In fact, the current Liberal leader has said that she felt that the previous government, her government, spent too much money on healthcare. We have to invest in public healthcare and in public hospitals. And we also have to recognize that a big part of our crisis right now is that our healthcare workers have been disrespected by this government. So we need to recruit more nurses. We need to retain them. And the way to do that is to make sure that we respect them, that we create working conditions that are better for them. We've got lots of proposals around this, and we've put them to the government. But, the solution is not doing what Doug Ford has done, which is taking all those frontline healthcare workers to court to suppress their wages at a time when we needed them most. So we've got an opportunity here to really fix things. And I think it does mean investing in public healthcare, and both in hospitals and at the community level.
Is there one thing you could do, what would the first thing you could do to actually get that on track where you get more family doctors? Because that's one of the big things that everybody talks about. I don't have a doctor. What's the one thing you can do first?
Yeah, well, 2.5 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor right now. Mm-hmm. By the end of this year, if we don't do something, it's going to almost double. Mm-hmm. So it's very scary. I completely agree. So I can give you a really good answer to this, and it's something that we have tabled with the Conservative government now, and they've voted against it. I don't know why, but within our first 100 days of government, the NDP would remove the administrative and paperwork that family doctors are dealing with. Family doctors have said very clearly, we want to do what we were trained to do, which is see patients. We are overwhelmed with the amount of paperwork, administrative backlog. We need to make sure that they get the administrative support they need. I have a plan to do that. I have a plan to connect them with other healthcare workers and family health teams and others. But we can do that right now so that the family doctors we do have are seeing patients, not wasting time on paperwork and administrative stuff. That is something we could do immediately to free them up. And then we have to start adding spaces in our medical schools and our residencies. We need to recruit more of our internationally trained physicians, who are many of them here in the country right now, here in Ontario. And yet this government has created so much red tape and so many barriers to them being certified to practice here. We can do a lot very quickly, but it does require a government that's not talk. It actually is all about action.
All right, a lot of the issues we're talking about are pressing and they're important, and you worry that they'll all get worse if the tariffs come into place, if we actually live in a world with Donald Trump's tariffs at 25%. So it is a key issue, whether you like to say it or not, is what is your plan for dealing with Trump's tariffs?
Right. Well, I'll say first of all that I've heard Doug Ford is heading down to Washington again this week. And the last time he went down, we still ended up with tariffs actually on steel and aluminum. So it hasn't helped very much. And I don't know what he's doing down there. But what I would like to see is a strong, united Canada first approach. And that means that premiers can't go off freelancing. We need to come together with leadership at the federal level. And I know that's been a problem as well, of course. This is a difficult time, and it wasn't an ideal time to go into an election campaign either, I'll tell you. But my plan is that, first of all, I think we need to deal with we need to make our economy more tariff-proof. Ontario needs to be tariff-proof, and we need a real plan to make that happen. I've talked about things like we need to address some of those internal Canadian trade barriers. Ontarians are stepping up right now. They're saying, you know what, I'm going to buy Ontario. I'm going to buy Canada. That's how I'm going to live my life from now on. And I see that, and I'm very impressed and empowered by it. So we need to join them in that. We need to invest as an Ontario government in our industries, in our small businesses, in our communities to strengthen them. A key piece of that is that Ontario has a lot of spending power in our procurement. And not so long ago, Doug Ford made a very bad decision. He took a big contract to build with the Ontario Line vehicles, and he sent it to Hitachi in the States to build those. That should have gone to an Ontario company, probably the one in Thunder Bay, right? But it should have gone to an Ontario company, to Ontario jobs. Those are our taxpayer dollars. And Doug Ford changed the rules to let that happen. I will never do that. I will support every single job in every single sector in this province because I believe in it, and I believe that we need to invest in our future.
You talk about the people you're meeting on the campaign trail. What are you hearing from small business owners or other people in different industries about the tariffs, what their fears are?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and I do hear that. I mean, I will say I've been speaking to a lot of folks on the front line, steel workers and auto workers in particular, about what, and of course, they're the industries themselves about what this means. There is anxiety, of course. I was reminded just the other day, talking to some steel workers in Hamilton, that in 2018, when Donald Trump brought in steel tariffs the last time, that Doug Ford just walked away, said we're leaving it up to the federal government. We lost jobs then. In the auto sector, when jobs were being pulled out of Oshawa, Doug Ford said, his immediate response was, well, that ship has sailed, nothing we can do here. It wasn't until NDP MPPs like Jennifer French in Oshawa said, wait a minute, you don't just walk away. You got to fight for this. That we ended up seeing anything change. But this is Doug Ford's approach. He folds like a cheap suit. We need to fight for those jobs. We need to fight for our industries, and we need to make sure that all of our dollars are going into supporting Ontario jobs, Ontario industries. So people are afraid. There's no question, and but they know. And I think the other thing I would say is that they also feel confident that we can push back, whether that's through retaliatory tariffs or other measures. I think as well, we need to be looking at who our friends and allies are in democratic nations around the world, right? We certainly will always have a strong trade relationship with the United States. I think that's important, but we have other friends and allies, and we need to be looking at those trade relationships more closely.
All right, couple of highway questions. We know we're a little tight for time here. You've mentioned getting rid of the 407 tolls. How do you actually do that?
Right. Well, you look. First of all, let's be clear. 407 is our highway. Ontario's highway. Ontario taxpayers built that highway. We paid for it. Conservative government back in the 90s. Sold it off, privatized it. I never agreed with that. My party never agreed with that. I think most Ontarians never agreed with that. We have literally paid now twice for it in the tolls, but also, of course, we built the thing. So it's time to renegotiate that, I think, and I believe we can do that. I think just recently Doug Ford let let the owners off the hook. They were supposed to pay $1 billion fine to Ontario and to Ontarians because they don't have enough cars running on it, right? They're supposed to have reasonable enough tolls that people are actually using the highway. That's not the case right now. And that was a missed opportunity because I think those are opportunities to use a carrot or a stick to negotiate better conditions for Ontarians. I want to remove the tolls on that highway so we can move traffic off of other highways and so people can get home to their families faster instead of sitting in bumper to bumper traffic. I want to make sure they have a few more bucks in their pocket. And that's how we do it. We got to have a tough negotiator, and that's what I am.
If you're elected Premier, let's talk about the construction of the Bradford Bypass and Highway 413. Would you call it off?
Look, the way I look at it right now is Doug Ford has made a lot of promises on building new highways, things like this. He's also got this new tunnel under the 401 that I think is fake. It's a bit of a fantasy, but a very expensive one and ridiculous. So that's one of the reasons I'm so focused on the 407. Because I think we should be using, to the best of our ability, the roads we already have first. And so I really want to make sure that we're using the 407. We don't need to wait 5, 10, however many years and spend billions of dollars to start to remove some of the pressure on people. We can do it right now. The only thing that's missing is the political will to get it done.
What's interesting, Marit, is, Doug Ford has won some endorsements from construction units, and some members have actually told our reporters it's because he's guaranteeing them work, even if it's with these promises of, a Highway 401 tunnel. We kind of saw this trend in the last election, too. What kind of outreach have you and your party done toward these unions since the last election to try to win some of that back?
I know that a lot of the trades, for example, will often put their support in the sitting government. I understand why, because there's infrastructure dollars associated with that. I've spent a lot of time sitting down with skilled workers, with skilled trades workers in this province and their unions, visiting their training facilities, which I'm a huge fan of. They're doing amazing work, and I think all I have to say is, look, we're going to keep building that infrastructure. We will keep building Ontario. I have plans to do a lot of infrastructure work in the province of Ontario because we have to, right? It is falling apart, our roads and our highways. We need to do that work now. We need to build schools, renovate schools. We need to repair our infrastructure, and we need the provincial government to actually start to take more of that on. And that's what we're going to do with our new deal for municipalities as well. So I'll continue to do that work. But look, the NDP is the party of labor. We will bring in the most progressive labor legislation. We will bring in tough labor laws to support unions and support working people. And we have the backing of a lot of unions right now, including big ones like the United Steelworkers and the Machinists and the Transit Union, but also, of course, so many working people across the province. And everywhere I go, I see those working people showing up to knock on doors, to help put up signs, because they know that the NDP is the government that's going to be on their side, whether they're a nurse or a teacher or a skilled trade worker. They're showing up because they know that we are the ones who show up with them no matter what, on the picket line and in the legislature too.
Mart, I'm curious to know what you think about the gender dynamics of the campaign. Every single PC campaign event seems to be backed by overwhelmingly male groups of construction and trades workers. Backdrops are big trucks, excavating equipment, helicopters. It's almost like the subtext seems to be Ford is a tough man to deal with Trump. Now, polling also shows a gender split where PCs have more support from men than women. And with your party, it's the opposite. What do you think? What's your take?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would just start by saying that I'm a big believer in increasing the representation of women in those skilled trades and in construction and stuff. And look, those unions, the skilled trades, they are doing a great job of trying to attract more women into those industries. So I think that is all changing before our very eyes, and that's exciting. But look, I think Doug Ford wants people to think that he's the only one who knows how to make a deal. And the truth is that the deals that he has made for Ontario are bad deals. He has negotiated terrible deals for Ontario. The one I mentioned earlier for Hitachi, when he should have made sure that contract went to an Ontario company and created jobs here in the province, and so many other examples. The luxury spa in downtown Toronto that we are subsidizing to the tune of $2.2 billion, $400 per household in Ontario, paying for this spa that nobody asked for in downtown Toronto. I mean, these are terrible deals, scandals, and I think it shows once again that Doug Ford he's not a negotiator. He's just somebody who makes deals for his friends. And I'm somebody who has an experience of sitting across the bargaining table from big American multinational corporations and negotiating good deals for Ontario workers, and that's what I'm going to do. And I always feel like it's on me to earn every vote from every Ontarian, and that's what I'm going to do.
Let's leave it with that for my last question, because I know you have to go. How do you earn the vote of those people who say that I could just never vote NDP? You're obviously trying to woo some of those voters as well, and they exist. We hear from them every time.
Sure. What
do you say to those voters who had said in the past, I just can't give my vote to the NDP?
I think think about the province that you want to build and how you want to see things change. Our policies are game changers. The NDP today, we are looking at putting money back in the pocket of Ontarians who are hardworking people, but who have had a tough time under Doug Ford and the Conservatives. And I would also say, I don't think Doug Ford is someone that a lot of Conservatives trust. I don't think he is like some of the Conservatives of the past. He's not a Bill Davis Conservative, you know? He's not somebody that I think a lot of people trust. I hear that a lot from Conservatives that I'm meeting across the province. People like farmers that I met recently, Stu Schneider in Wilmot, who said to me, you know, my whole, I've always voted Conservative, and but you know, Doug Ford and the Conservatives are trying to seize their farmland. And they're not going to have it. So this is a different Conservative government. I don't think they can be trusted. And by the way, that farmer, he's voting the first time for the NDP in the next election. He said his ancestors might be turning in their graves, but I think that's I'm hearing that more and more out there. I think this is people are looking for a government that they can trust and that shares their values. And the NDP, you know, we've been our tradition all across this country, especially on the western provinces, is very fiscally responsible. We respect the taxpayer, but we also care about people, and we're going to make sure that Ontarians are cared for.
And that's where we'll leave it on that note. Marit Stiles, leader of the Ontario NDP. Thanks for this, Marit. Appreciate your time, and certainly good luck next week.
Thank you very much.
Our thanks to Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles for joining us on this special episode of Trillium Talk, powered by the Inside the Village podcast. For complete Ontario election coverage, be sure to check out the Village Media outlet in your city. Become a Trillium Insider today at thetrillium.ca and watch Trillium Talk every weekday right here from the campaign trail with our team of reporters at the Trillium. For all of us at Village Media, thanks for watching.